Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the first intelligence podcast. Today is Friday, July 25, 2025. And I hope you're checking out our new YouTube channel, Next Site Intelligence. Here on The Deep Dive, well, our mission is pretty straightforward. We take your sources, dig through them, and pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight. It's basically your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, maybe with a few surprising facts, and just enough humor to keep things interesting. Today, we're diving deep into the Global Intelligence Brief for Thursday, July 24, 2025. Now, this report comes from Next Site. They're a really impressive intelligence company focusing on global intel, and they actually develop their own open-source intelligence platforms, which is pretty cool tools to help investigators all over the world. If you're looking for detailed, customized intelligence reports, you should definitely check out their website, www.next-site.com. As you know, we do these deep dives daily, so you can rely on us for these key insights every single day.
And something really crucial for getting the most out of this intelligence is understanding these reliability confidence flags that NextSite uses in the report. They're vital, really, for assessing the information you're getting.
Right, the flags. Can you give us a quick rundown on how those work?
Sure. So first you have source reliability. It uses the Admiralty scale, A through FA, means the source is completely reliable. Down at F, well, its reliability just can't be judged. Then there's information confidence, which is on a scale of 1 to 6. 1 means the info is confirmed by independent sources, solid stuff. 6 means, again, it can't be judged. So these flags, they give you, the listener, a window into the certainty, the context, helps you see beyond just the headline.
Okay, got it. That context is definitely key. Right, let's unpack this brief then, and we'll kick things off in North America. It looks like domestic policies, legal disputes are driving some, well, significant changes there. The overall take, the security environment is still relatively stable. Threat is low to moderate, risk is low. First big item. A U.S. federal appeals court ruling, this was yesterday, July 24th. They unanimously rejected former President Trump's executive order that tried to end birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants. The court was really clear. The 14th Amendment grants citizenship regardless of parental status. This seems like more than just an immigration ruling, doesn't it? What's the deeper significance here?
Absolutely. It's a major check on executive power. You know, it really underscores the judiciary's role in upholding constitutional rights. We saw migrant advocacy groups celebrating, naturally, the White House criticized the decision. But for the economy, particularly labor markets that depend on immigrant families, this ruling actually removes quite a bit of uncertainty. This piece of intel is flagged B2.
B2. Okay, so that means
Source is usually reliable, and the information is assessed as probably true. The threat level itself is low. It's seen as an institutional check, working as intended.
And it got international attention too, right? I saw Arab News covered it.
Yes, it did. And looking at the people's hearsay element, Twitter sentiment leaned heavily in support of the court's ruling. Lots of comments about defending constitutional norms. That aligns with the low threat assessment. Public opinion seems to support the established legal framework here.
Okay, sticking with the U.S. President Trump also issued another executive order yesterday, this one focused on college sports. It prohibits third-party pay-for-play payments to college athletes trying to preserve that idea of amateurism, though it does explicitly allow legitimate brand endorsements. It also aims to safeguard scholarships, protect non-revenue sports, and directs federal agencies to clarify the whole student-athlete status thing, shielding colleges from some legal challenges. Why this order now? What's the context?
Well, it's a direct counterpunch to those recent state-level name, image, and likeness laws, the NIL laws. The argument from the administration is that NIL is basically turning into pay-for-play bidding wars, and that risks diverting resources from women's sports and those other non-revenue-generating sports that are pretty vital to the college athletic system. The financial implications are potentially huge for endorsement deals, for athletic department budgets. This one's also flagged B2. Usually reliable source information, probably true. Threat level is low, just a domestic policy shift. And we have corroboration from the whitehouse.gov fact sheet itself.
Right. Now, more troubling story out of Florida. A police officer was acquitted yesterday, July 24th, in a case involving the assault of a black college student during a traffic stop back in 2023 in Tallahassee. This verdict immediately triggered protests. Civil rights groups are alleging systemic racism.
Yes, and the implications here are significant. This verdict has really reignited fierce debates about police accountability and trust between law enforcement and communities, not just locally in Tallahassee, but it resonates wider. And for municipalities, there's a heightened litigation risk now. Insurance costs could go up. This intel carries a B3 flag.
B3. So usually reliable source, but the info is only possibly true.
Possibly true, yes. Or perhaps the full implications are still unfolding. The threat level is assessed as moderate because of the potential for community unrest. Arab News again provided detailed reporting on the events, the reactions, including comments from civil rights lawyers and even Governor Ron DeSantis.
And the public reaction, what's the hearsay on this?
Looking at Reddit sentiment, there was a lot of expressed frustration, a clear sense of mistrust in law enforcement related to this case. That feeds directly into that moderate threat assessment for social unrest. It shows that raw nerve the verdict touched. So if we try to connect these dots in North America, it's interesting. You have institutional checks, like the court ruling on birthright citizenship, providing a kind of stability. But then you have events like the Florida verdict, sparking sustained social unrest, which, could actually start to discourage retail investment in those specific cities. One indicator to watch if you're tracking risk is municipal bond spreads.
How so?
Think of it like a city's risk premium. If the gap widens between what a city pays to borrow money versus, say, a super safe treasury bond, it means investors are getting nervous. It flags rising concern about stability or the city's finances. It really raises that question. How deeply do these domestic legal and policy fights shape the actual economic and social health of a place?
Fascinating attention. Okay, let's pivot now. Shifting focus to the Middle East and Europe. Things get really interesting here. Complex, certainly volatile. The Middle East BLUF, the bottom line up front, is stark, deeply unstable. Gaza starvation, stalled ceasefires, tricky nuclear talks, threat level, severe. Risk level, high. Let's start with Gaza. The humanitarian crisis is worsening. Reports from yesterday, July 24th, the numbers are just grim. At least 115 Palestinians died from malnutrition, 62 killed in Israeli attacks in just the past week. The head of UNRWA, the UN agency there, pleaded for immediate humanitarian corridors, describing families literally breaking down from hunger. It's horrific. Beyond the human cost, what's the sort of secondary impact intelligence-wise?
Well, what's striking is the growing international focus on the human rights aspect, the calls for accountability. But there's also a huge financial angle. The sheer cost of infrastructure destruction is massive. Billions needed for reconstruction. And here's a key insight. Donor fatigue is a real risk. The world's capacity to fund recovery isn't endless, and this crisis could drag on partly because the money dries up. This is flagged B2, usually reliable, probably true. Threat level is severe, purely on the humanitarian crisis scale. And Al Jazeera reported on related events yesterday. U.S. health professionals, veterans protesting outside the Capitol.
Protesting what specifically?
Urging President Trump to halt support for Israel, pointing to the famine conditions, claiming U.S. complicity. They use strong language like, stop enabling the genocide. Representative Rashida Tlaib also made calls for Congress to act. It shows the pressure building domestically in the U.S., too.
And the emotional temperature from people affected or watching closely?
The People's Hearsay from Instagram paints a picture of deep despair and anger. We saw comments like, our families are starving in Gaza while the world watches. How many more must die? That kind of sentiment, that desperation, points to a high risk of radicalization. When people feel hopeless and ignored, that's dangerous territory.
Okay, now a major diplomatic development. France announced it will recognize a Palestinian state. President Macron sent a letter to Palestinian Authority President Abbas yesterday, stating France will push for this at the UN General Assembly in September. His reasoning, it's needed to revive peace talks and address the Gaza crisis.
That's quite a step.
A very significant step. And the diplomatic fallout was immediate and sharp. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu called it a reward for terror. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated it undermines negotiations. So clear opposition there. However, Canada expressed support for international law and was critical of recent Israeli actions. So a split among Western allies. This carries a B2 flag, usually reliable, probably true. The threat level is substantial minus, reflecting that diplomatic friction rather than immediate conflict. How did this play out globally in terms of public opinion or state reactions?
Well, People's Hearsay gives us a glimpse. On Weibo in China, the sentiment applauded France's move, framing it as an end to colonialism fitting China's narrative. On X, formerly Twitter, particularly in the Middle East, there was a sense of hope. Comments like, France finally recognizing Palestine, maybe this will end the occupation. It shows how differently this is viewed depending on where you sit.
Now, shifting to something more potentially explosive, analysts warned yesterday about a possible second Israel-Iran war. The suggestion is that Israel sees its recent conflict with Iran as a tactical win and might be planning another strike, maybe needing U.S. approval, possibly using sanctions as a pretext. What's the level of confidence in this analysis?
It's flagged C3. That means the source is considered fairly reliable, but the information itself is only possibly true. It's more analytical, speculative at this stage. But the potential impact is huge, hence the severe plus threat level assessment for potential war. Analysts are cautioning this could completely destabilize the region. We already saw oil prices jump just on this speculation.
Right, oil prices are always sensitive to this.
Exactly. So connecting the Middle East threads, the horrific situation in Gaza, the stalled peace process, they're directly feeding into market volatility oil. Gold prices reflect this instability. The diplomatic moves, like France's recognition, show growing polarization, even if it's not direct conflict yet. But combine that diplomatic tension with the sheer desperation for the humanitarian crisis, that's where the risk of radicalization really increases. And potentially, yes, inspiring lone wolf attacks in Western countries. That risk climbs higher if Western governments continue weapons supplies without visibly addressing the humanitarian side. The advice: energy importers should probably be hedging costs. And it becomes a Tier 1 escalation watch if hostilities actually spread to oil infrastructure.
Okay, a very tense picture in the Middle East. Let's broaden our view now with the global scan. Looking at economic shifts, environmental challenges elsewhere, creating new dynamics. First, Latin America. Big news concerning Brazil. The U.S. is threatening 50% tariffs on Brazilian imports starting August 1st. This is apparently linked to allegations Brazil harbored former President Bolsonaro. The immediate market reaction. Orange prices have plummeted. Brazilian farmers are panicking, fearing their fruit will rot. The U.S. buys a huge chunk, 42% of Brazil's orange juice exports. What's the deeper impact here?
It's potentially devastating for those farmers, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it could ripple through to U.S. consumers via higher orange juice prices down the line. We've already seen Brazilian agribusiness stocks take a hit just on the threat. This is flagged B2, usually a reliable source, probably true info. The threat level is moderate plus ANDA, reflecting significant economic risk.
And the reaction in Brazil.
The people's hearsay from Twitter in Brazil shows real alarm. Comments like, "Trump's tariffs will kill our farmers. Where is the government?" It captures that sense of panic and the immediate calls for government intervention.
Okay, shifting continents now to Oceania Pacific. A rare tornado hit Perth, Australia. This was overnight, July 23rd to 24th. Struck a place called City Beach, damaged dozens of homes, caused flash flooding. The Bureau of Meteorology confirmed it was a supercell thunderstorm, even producing huge hailstones, like over 7.5 centimeters.
Yeah.
That's wild for Perth.
It is quite rare for Perth, yes. And while the immediate impact is localized damage, the intelligence angle here is that it underscores this trend of increasing climate volatility. We're seeing a strengthening link between these extreme weather events and social instability, economic disruption. Property damage is estimated in the millions already. Insurance claims will be rising. This is flagged B2, usually reliable, probably true. Threat level moderate plus foo category, natural disaster. The Watchers website had detailed reports corroborating the Bureau of Meteorology's confirmation.
And public sentiment there.
Twitter in Australia showed clear alarm. Things like tornado in Perth, climate change is not a joke anymore. People are immediately linking these unusual, severe local events to the bigger picture of climate change and calling for action.
Also in the Pacific, an interesting development in Palau. The Council of Chiefs recommended yesterday that the president reject a U.S. proposal. The U.S. wants Palau to host third-country asylum seekers. Why the rejection?
The chiefs raised several concerns. Palau lacks the resources, they argued. It would strain their fragile economy. And there's a sensitivity about tying Palau too closely to U.S. strategic interests, particularly militarization. This proposal is part of a wider U.S. effort, really, to manage migration flows by partnering with third countries, often offering financial support in return. This carries a B3 flag, usually reliable source, info possibly true. Threat levels moderate, plus mainly touching on sovereignty concerns.
What are people in Palau saying?
The people's hearsay from Facebook in Palau showed nationalist sentiment, resistance. Comments like, "Our island isn't a dumping ground for other countries' migrants stand up to the U.S." It highlights that local pushback against perceived external pressure. Okay, so let's try to tie some of these global threads together now. The next set report highlights some key correlations. What broad patterns emerge when you connect these seemingly separate events?
Yeah, what's the bigger picture?
Right. First, there's this dynamic of trade wars versus commodity prices. You see the U.S. tariffs, like against Brazil, maybe EU counter-tariffs coming. It signals a clear return to protectionism. And the effect? It's depressing emerging market currencies, hitting commodity prices like oranges, while pushing money into safe havens like gold. The warning is, if these trade tensions keep escalating, watch out for a synchronized global growth slowdown. Central banks might even need to coordinate their response.
Okay. Trade friction impacting markets. What else?
Second, humanitarian crises versus political radicalization. We talked about Gaza. But the report also notes things like war crimes convictions elsewhere. There's this rising international focus on human rights, but also intense polarization, especially visible on social media. The analysis suggests prolonged crises where people feel abandoned or targeted can absolutely fuel radicalization. And that, unfortunately, can translate into risks like lone wolf attacks in Western nations, particularly if weapon supplies continue without addressing the root humanitarian issues. Monitoring extremist chatter becomes critical here.
A sobering connection. And the third theme, climate events versus sovereign debt.
That rare Perth tornado is one example. Add in things like the recent International Court of Justice ruling on climate obligations. It all points to the increasing frequency and cost of climate disasters. And here's the link. Countries already carrying high debt and also highly exposed to climate impacts, think small island nations, but also vulnerable regions in larger countries that could face higher borrowing costs. Why? Because investors start demanding a climate risk premium. This could potentially push vulnerable economies into debt distress. So these correlations give you a real sense of the interconnected risks and what to keep an eye on next.
So pulling it all together, what does this mean for you, our listeners? This intelligence brief from Next Site, it really offers that deep, multi-layered view of the world. It pushes past the headlines to show you the interconnected forces truly shaping events.
Exactly. Understanding those confidence flags helps you think critically about the information itself. Recognizing the correlations helps you anticipate what might come next, see the potential ripple effects. And paying attention to the people's hearsay, the public sentiment, gives you that pulse on how these events are actually landing with people, the potential social impacts. Getting this kind of holistic view. It's just crucial in today's world with so much information flying around. Helps you make sense of it all.
It really does. So here's a final thought to chew on. How do these global shifts, the trade tensions, the geopolitical maneuvering, the undeniable climate impacts, how do they directly or indirectly touch your daily life, your decisions? How will you use this kind of insight to navigate whatever comes next? Something to think about. Okay, don't forget to follow us on YouTube, like, share, and definitely comment below. We really do want to hear your opinions. That's it for today's deep dive. Enjoy your day.